Well,
Well,
Tuesday night,
we're back.
missed a few weeks, maybe more than a few weeks.
I think it's been 7 weeks.
Oh, has it really?
Well, this Sunday is 7 weeks. So yeah, seven
Well,
weeks.
and you're mostly to blame for the miss, but I think I did. I did miss because of some other reasons, and I actually had a guest lined up, but that person ended up having a bike crash, oddly enough. So,
So crazy. Yeah, we were gonna meet with them. Was it a couple days ago? No, last Friday. Last Friday. Yeah, and you're like, actually, they couldn't come because they had a bike crash, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I mean, we're kind of dancing around this, but like I had a pretty serious bike crash. You had a bike crash. The
mhm.
other guest had a bike crash. So we thought it'd be a good time to at least talk about a few of these bike crashes. And I know many of the listeners don't have any idea of like what's going on, why we haven't been
Yeah.
on. Some do, because a lot of them have reached out, and
Mhm.
a lot of them are our friends. And so that being said, I guess we should just rip the band-aid off. I
Yeah.
still
So let's
I still
let's
have band-aids. I still have band-aids on, which is ironic, right? It's been
Yeah, there
seven.
you go. There you go. So yeah, let's cover this because I think it is instructive to
Yeah.
go through what happened and now how you're recovering and so forth. But let's give, like you said, you already gave a summary, big picture. Uh, for everyone who doesn't know, Ted was in a pretty serious crash, hospital, up in Canada, had to, work out how to transport back to the US. And he's been laid up quite a bit. And frankly, this is the best I've actually seen him. We've talked a few times, and this almost looks like normal Ted.
Almost. We're getting there for sure.
So I want to get into the crash a little bit and the details of that. But before we do that, I want to even work backwards. And even what were you doing in Calgary?
Yeah, so I was in Calgary for kind of like a family reunion, but there happened to be a race, and I think we actually podcasted from there. That was our last
I think we
podcast.
did.
I was at my parents' house because my parents live there, and the provincial Olympic distance triathlon happened to be the same weekend. So I'm like, well, I'll bring my bike up and do, I love to do a race, and I hadn't done an Olympic distance race in a long time. So I was like, yeah, this will be super fun to do. And I've raced in Canada many times.
So,
So I was just really looking forward to the race. So that's what I was doing up there.
so it was a family reunion plus a race, which is so
Yep.
cool. I love that. I
Yep.
mean, combining two things like that is often a lot of fun, a fun trip to make. So, but knowing that the race was just sort of secondary, and it was just sort of there, and it popped up. Did you
Yep.
do any like course recon? You
Oh yeah.
haven't done this race before, have you?
I'd never done the race before, but I mean, I did recon as far as like on maps, and it's interesting, like going onto Strava and looking at people that have raced before, and I knew the times, and I knew like it wasn't very hard to figure out
Yeah.
as far as
Okay.
like because it's a shorter distance, and then the bike itself was 5 laps. So in 40K, 5 laps is like 8K a lap.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it was just basically a loop. It was like
Okay.
an out and back with a loop.
Okay.
And so it wasn't that difficult to know, but I mean, there's a few things that I kind of figured out the day before when we were out there. We drove a little bit of the course. The roads were really bumpy, and Calgary is known for bumpy roads.
Yeah. I mean,
So
it's winter here,
yeah,
9 months out of the year.
so that was something that was in my mind, and like I did little things, like had my tire pressure lower than even I normally would, just because I knew it was going to be bumpy. Um, and did like a little recon, like stuff. The weather was perfect. It was
So,
like 60 degrees,
hmm
65 degrees. Here it was like 105,
yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah, so like I did some recon as much as I could do, but really like for a short distance race office, I don't do like that much recon.
yeah. Right, right, right. And how about gear choices? Your normal gear
No,
used
I
for
did do
2.3, or
full.
what are you doing?
I didn't have full arrow. Like I didn't have my. Oh, so no, I did actually take my disc, but only because it was more of a technical issue. I was literally packing my bike, and I can't remember. It's because it's been like 8 weeks now. I can't remember exactly why, but something happened with my normal rear wheel, and something with a cassette, or I got a flat tire, and I'm like, oh, forget it. I'm just gonna grab the disc. It's already set up, and it was set up tubeless, so I just threw it in at the last minute. But like I wouldn't say like I wasn't like this was not the A race of the year by any means.
No,
Like I didn't
no.
like didn't shave my legs kind of thing. Like
Mhm.
you know,
It was just for fun. Yeah, I mean,
it
it
was
was
for
just
fun.
neat,
It
and
was
you
for fun.
don't know anyone at this point going
No,
into the race.
no, and honestly, like I've raced up there enough that I know some like the heavy hitters, but
Yeah.
um, none of the real heavy hitters in my age group were there because, and I think it's because the 70.3 Calgary was the weekend before.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I looked at like a lot of them were there.
Hmm.
So like I actually really like I really thought I was going to go and win, to be
Okay.
honest. I was like, okay, like that'll be kind of fun, like win my home province's
Hmm.
championship. So the goal was to win,
Sure.
but I also knew that I didn't have to like kill myself to win, but I almost did. So that's kind of ironic.
Let's get to that. So,
Yeah.
tell us about the swim. How'd the swim go?
Yeah, swim was great. So like we didn't know for sure if it was gonna be wetsuit legal or not because it was hovering right around the temperature. It
Okay.
ended up being wetsuit legal. I had a great swim. I'd actually been swimming really well up until that point, and I was super happy with my swim. I don't know what my swim time was though.
Oh,
I
okay.
can't even tell you because well, I don't even know if the race director has the chip yet, to be honest with you. I don't wear a watch when I swim race. So, but I got out in a good position. Like there's lots of bikes around. So I got in a good position. And even when I was out on the road in the first lap, there wasn't very many people on
Mm,
the road. So I felt like I had a really good swim. A good transition, no
yep.
cramping. Like everything was good. I'll just keep going. So they got on the bike and it's really interesting. Because I didn't take the race too seriously, and it was like this reunion the night before. I didn't have my normal food.
Oh, interesting.
Like I was like, it doesn't really matter. I'm here for fun.
Just a
So
little.
like I'm eating the sausages and I'm, like having a salad, like things I would never do, like
Right, right.
potato salad and all these things I'd never would do. And
No.
same like the morning breakfast, like I really am regimented what I have when I'm doing normal racing. But I'm like, well, whatever my parents have, like, yeah, some granola and some like I wasn't really too on my nutrition to be completely honest with you.
Well, when you do a race like that, I mean, that's sort of the fun part is
Right.
it's okay to try something extremely different than what you normally would. And who knows, maybe you stumble upon something that actually works. So that's interesting. All right. So you got out of the swim,
Yep.
no problems in transition,
Oh,
jumping on the bike.
yep. Jump on the bike. And it's a really interesting thing. Like 5 or 6 days before they send out an email that, hey, due to the way the roads are built in this community, because it's a community inside of a community,
Mhm.
we're going to ride on the left hand side of the right road. So, like, it's 4 lanes, two going one way, two going the other way. So, we're on the right hand side of the road, but on the left hand side, so they could have it open to traffic
Mhm.
on like beside us, basically. And it was an interesting thing because like I understood why they were doing that. It was because most of the houses had access on that side, and so I guess they were having issues with the community. That the community wasn't happy that this race was like kind of taking up their Sunday morning, and traffic. We always deal with
Yeah,
these
right, sure.
situations. So I understood what they were doing, but it came really obvious to me early on in the bike course that it wasn't going to be extremely safe
Hmm.
because there was cars on our right, and that caused people to ride on the left.
Yeah.
And so, me, I'm a pretty good biker, especially getting to like the second and third lap. I'm starting to pass people,
Yeah.
and people are passing other people on the right
Hmm.
and some on the left.
Yeah, once you go on the wrong side, I mean, once you bite, send that course on that side of the road where people aren't used to it, that by itself is chaotic. And then, like you said, you have that. Now, but there is an important detail that it's not only the Olympic racers that you were on, there was also a sprint race
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. So the sprint race started after the Olympics. And they ended up on the same bike course at the same
Okay.
time.
And this is
So
the five loop.
5 loop for Olympic and 2 loops for sprint.
Okay.
And so by the time I got through like the second loop, started on the third, I started to feel like, oh, this is not safe. Like
Hmm.
just the congestion.
Yeah.
like people
Yeah.
passing on the wrong side,
Yeah. Yeah.
cars on your right, cars
Yeah.
on your left, and people like literally kind of passing everywhere. And I actually, and why I mentioned the food thing, I wasn't actually feeling that good. I started to feel a little nauseous.
Yeah.
And I mean, I still was having like decent power, nothing great, but so actually on the second loop, there was a downhill section, and at the bottom of it, there was a guy laid out and fire trucks and ambulances beside him.
Oh.
Um, I subsequently met him in the hospital, just so you know. So
Oh.
we'll get to that. But I was like, this is not safe. I could start to sense that at that point. And then once I got around to the third loop, I'm like, this is definitely
Yeah.
not safe. So I just actually, I honestly like wasn't feeling good. I'm like, okay, like I know what I can run. Like if my stomach comes around, I'll be able to run well. But I started sitting up a lot more. And I was like, I'm not going to take risks.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pass people on the right. I'm going to like be yelling at people. Like, and I was like, hey, I'm coming on your left. Like, but really like I had this kind of epiphany. Like, I'm like, this is not safe. I need to ride smarter or smart. Like, not that I don't ride like, but less aggressive, I guess, as it would be. So yeah, so that was kind of what was going on the bike course, and
So,
you had the bumpy roads,
mhm.
bad situation with traffic and people going the wrong way, and yeah,
All right. So tell me about the crash.
yeah. So every loop there was an out and back that was down a hill and then up the hill. On the fourth lap, I went down the hill. The guy was still on the ground that was with the ambulance and stuff. Went past him, came back up the hill, and a guy passed me going up the hill. And I looked over because he had the same bike I had. And I'm like, hey, like I even said to him, hey, nice bike. He's like, yeah, nice bike. Like just kind of like more fun.
Yeah.
Then we take a right-hand turn, and um it's a flat section, and he wasn't going that fast. Like he went up the hill really fast, but then kind of slowed down. And we came side by side, or so coming up behind him, and I was on the left of him, and there was somebody to the right of him, but there was a full lane of traffic. I had probably 3 or 4 feet to pass him, and as I came up behind him, I heard like a snap, and I can still remember looking down and seeing like a chain, like like flapping,
Mhm.
and as I looked down to the right, he fell into me. So he fell into my front wheel. And so basically what had happened was his chain broke. He lost balance. Like I heard it break. Maybe a half a stroke, pedal stroke later, he lost balance. So he fell into my front wheel. And I can still like in my mind see my front wheel turn.
Mhm.
And I don't honestly remember if I was in aero or not. I,
Mhm.
I I was able to get my data. I was going 18 miles an hour,
Yeah.
which isn't really that fast. I
Yeah.
mean, considering what we go on the downhills, and
Mhm.
like my average was 24 miles an hour for the race. So like that wasn't like we were just getting up to speed. So I don't know if I was in aero or not, but I definitely didn't have time to like brake
All right.
in any way. So my front wheel went that way. I basically ran over him, and I flew into the air. My Garmin computer says I flew 13 feet, which is pretty interesting. I didn't know. I knew that you could actually get flight data on your Garmin computer, um, but that then I landed on my back.
Mhm.
So my head hit the ground, but it just scraped a little bit because there's a little scrape on my helmet. But I never had any issues. But I was laying on the ground, and I could just feel like I couldn't breathe. Like the air was, like you get winded, like your air knocked out of you or your wind knocked out of you. So I was laying there trying to catch my breath. And I mean, it was really awesome. Like a lady stopped right away, and she came right to me, and she's like, she was in the race, or it was a racer. She's like, I saw what happened. She's like, are you okay? And I really, I couldn't answer. I'm trying to like get my breath. And she's like, I'm a nurse. So, she stabilized my neck and my head. Um, and then I started to be able to breathe a little bit better. And I could answer her. And then another person stopped, and he's like, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I'm going to help you. And also in the race, which is really super cool. Like, and I, once again, lesson learned, like in my opinion, that's the right thing to do. Is
Mm,
if somebody is just in a crash and laying on the middle of the road, I think we should be obligated as other racers to, like,
yeah.
your race doesn't matter. Like,
Mhm.
stop, do what you can, even if it's just directing traffic around me. Like, I was in the road, and the guy I ran over, he was also in the road,
Mhm.
right? And once again, we only have one lane of road, so, and there's a lot of people on this bike course.
Mhm.
So there was somebody else he'd stopped, and he was like directing people around and telling
Yeah.
people to slow down. So, anyways, I could start to talk, and I'm talking to the physician, and I knew my clavicle was broken. Like,
Mhm.
I could just, like, just kind of moving. I could feel it just crunching.
Right.
And so I told him, I said, my clavicle's broken.
Were you in pain at that point? I mean, or was it still?
No, not really, like, not really pain.
Okay.
More like thought process going to my mind, can I finish this race?
Yeah. Yeah.
Still. Like, that's still going my, and then, but as soon as I realized my clavicle was broken, I'm like, I can't finish.
Mhm.
I've done a race, we've talked about it before, on a separated shoulder, but I was like, I can't. So they helped me sit up. They grabbed me by the other arm, and at that point, I really thought my clavicle was broken, and that was it. Like,
Mhm.
I was like, oh, that sucks. Like, yeah, and I mean, like, you hear about cyclists all the time breaking their collarbones and clavicles, and so they sat me up, and they're like, well, let's help you get off the road. And I'm like, okay. They're like, do you think you can stand? I'm like, yeah, I can stand. So basically, like, one person was on my right hand side and just helped me walk off the road. So I walked through a full lane of, like, traffic. They stopped the traffic, and off to, like, stepped up onto, like, the side of the road. And there was a race volunteer there, and he's like, well, like, do you need medical? I'm like, yeah, probably need somebody to come check me out. So they called an EMT, and the EMT came, and he evaluated me. And I'm standing talking to him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, my collarbone's broken. I know that's what's going on. I told him, what I do for a living. And he's like, okay, cool. So that he starts, he takes my vitals, and everything seems about normal. Um, and he's like, okay, I really think we should, like, call an ambulance. And I'm like, no.
Mhm.
And this is, once again, a lesson, right? Like, I tell my students this all the time. It's like, you can't rely on people in the first 10 minutes,
Right.
right? Especially in the heat of a race.
Yeah.
And so
There's a lot to process right then.
there's a
Yeah.
lot to process. And I'm like, well,
Your
I'm not.
clavicle's already broken, so I mean that's one thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm not not in my own country, right? My wife is not there. I have no way to get a hold of her. Like, finally, like, I get the volunteer to call her. She doesn't answer. She was coming to the race later. My dad drove me. She
Hmm.
didn't come to the race later. I didn't know if she was there or not. Then I was like, well, I'll text her from
Hmm.
his phone. So I gave him the number that he texted her. No response. And I was like, oh man, like, what am I gonna do? I don't know my dad's phone number, because, like, it's just dad on my cell phone.
Yeah, yeah, right.
And so he's like, yeah, I think we should call an ambulance. I'm like, no, I don't want to deal with, like, insurance and all this stuff. And I'll just have my wife take me to the hospital, like, or go get an X-ray. I'm fine. And he's like, so you don't want to go? I'm like, no, I'm good. He's like, okay, like, if you don't want to go, like, I'm good, but I'm gonna leave. And at this time, the race director came, and he grabbed my bike, and he's like, and I'm like, if I can just get a ride back to the transition area, because my wife is there, I'm sure. And he's like, yeah, but my car's full of stuff. I can bring your bike, but I'll come back for you. I'm like, okay. So he leaves, the EMT leaves, and there's a police officer that was helping with traffic now, and the volunteer, and then was there still. And all of a sudden, I went into shock.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I am nauseous. I'm gonna pass out. And so the police officer, I'm like, can you help me? He's like, yeah. And he helps me, like, lay down. So I know, like, the best thing you can do is lay down in that situation. And I'm like, get the EMT back. So
Hmm.
he hadn't gone that far. He's probably only 100 yards away.
Yeah.
So the EMT comes back, and I'm like, yeah, I need to go to the hospital.
Mm.
And he's like, okay. And then he, like, takes more vitals, and he calls an ambulance, because he didn't actually have, there was no, the ambulance at the race was at the other accident.
Yeah.
So they call an ambulance, and, like, 15 or 20 minutes later, the ambulance comes, and they're like, well, can you walk? I'm like, yeah, my collarbone is just broken. I'm good.
Yeah. Right.
And so I just, I need to walk across two lanes of traffic to get to the ambulance. So they're like, okay, well, help me stand up. So they help me
And
stand
you're
up.
still only suspecting clavicles, the broken.
Clavicle, and my ribs were sore,
Yeah,
but I didn't really still have an idea of
yeah.
the full extent. So they stood me up, and I put a little put some pressure on my left leg, and instantaneous like just pain in
Mm,
my hip, and I'm like, actually, I can't walk. And
mm,
that's when I first realized, man, this is pretty serious.
yeah.
So they bring the gurney and they bring me in the into the ambulance, and they're like, "Well, do you have any ID?" I'm like, "No, I have nothing.
Mm,
I literally have a triathlon suit on. Like,
yeah.
I didn't even have I didn't even have my helmet. Like the race director took my helmet with my bike. I didn't even have my helmet, right?
Hmm.
I'm in my cycling shoes, and they're like, "Well, okay, well, we can take you to the emergency room." I'm like, "Hey, listen, my wife's at the transition.
Hmm.
It's like a kilometer, a mile from here." I said, "It's gonna be way better off for everybody if we get her because I can't get in touch with her." He's like, "Well, let me try on my phone." So give him the number. Their phones don't work for international calls.
Oh no.
And the only way to do it is to call their dispatch
Yeah.
and have them. So they're trying to go through this. I'm like, man, just go to the transition. My wife will be there. She'll be looking for me. She'll know there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Because this has been like almost probably 45 minutes now,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Like by the time I got to transition, people in the race were
Yeah. Right.
finishing the race. Like, and like I'm going to be in the top, I don't know, 10 in the race. And um, so, anyways, my wife now she's looking for me, and she's talking to people. I'm like, oh well, not everyone's on the bike, and she's like, you don't understand.
Yeah. Right.
And like, oh well, we don't know. Nobody's been hurt or anything. Like, there's nobody out on the like. Your husband must just be riding slow. And she's like, you don't understand.
Hmm.
Like, there's no way he's not done. And so,
Hmm.
anyways, they're going back and forth, and finally, so the ambulance agrees to actually drive to the transition, and they find a volunteer, and the volunteer finds my wife, and fortunately and unfortunately, because this was this reunion, I had like friends and family, actually other friends and family that came to the race, and they brought their kids and all this
Oh
stuff.
boy. Hmm.
They're never going to want to do triathlon, any of these people now. So anyways, we go to the first hospital, the one that was closest to it, and like I have a little bit better idea of what's going on, and
Hmm.
um, but it's typical in an emergency room anywhere. Like I'm not dying.
Hmm.
So I waited like 6 hours, just laying down in this gurney or bed. And finally the doctor came in, and I tell her what's going on. And I don't think she thought it was as serious as it ended up being at the
Right.
time. It's like,
Well, you're talking, you're
yeah,
coherent,
yeah, there was
you're
no head injury.
assessing.
Yeah.
Right.
There's no head injury at all. Like I'm literally having a conversation with her. I'm telling her this is what's going on. I'm like, I'm pretty sure there's something wrong with my hip as well. I don't feel like it's dislocated, but explaining all this. And she's like, okay, well, let's do a CT scan of your hips up to your neck,
Mhm.
and do an X-ray on top of that, an X-ray of your clavicle, since we're pretty sure it's broken. Okay. So we get that, and like a half hour later, she comes in, and I'll probably never forget this as long as I live. And she's like, well, do you want the bad news or the bad news?
Oh boy.
And like that's when I started to realize that this is more serious.
Mhm.
So she's like, okay, well, here's the deal. Yes, you have a fracture of your clavicle. You've also fractured 5 ribs. You have two fractures in your pelvis. One going through your hip joint, one in your pubic bone, and you have a hemothorax, which is basically bleeding in your lungs. And she's like, the bleeding in your lung is not bad enough that we feel like we need to put a tube in you, but it's there. And so this is not a trauma center. This was just a regular emergency room. She's like, we're going to transfer you to the trauma center. So
Mhm.
kind of like in Las Vegas, there's like one trauma center, like a level 1 trauma center. There's only one in like the southern part of Alberta. So
And is Marie with you at this
yeah,
point?
so Marie's with me, and my dad is with me,
All right.
and like my friend, yeah, my friend, she was bringing us my parents food, or my mom, or my wife and my dad food, and I mean it was actually pretty interesting.
Well, and
Pretty,
that's a really a good point is that, having that emergency plan is something that athletes we should all have
yeah,
because as you're receiving that news, you are hearing it, but it's better to have someone else there so they can really absorb it a little differently. So that's great that you had someone there.
I did want to add one little piece of the story. So um, when we're in the ambulance, I was like, Marie, that's my wife's name. Why didn't you answer your phone? Like you knew that I was like I wasn't coming in. Like
Yeah,
she's like, I have no missed calls from you.
right, right.
I have no missed texts. I've no missed anything. So at this point, or finally at the emergency room, my friend, she actually did this amazing job and got all of my stuff. Like I don't know how, like between like texting back and forth and pictures, she got my bag, she got my wetsuit, she got my
Oh,
running shoes, she got literally every little
that's
piece, my
awesome.
goggles, my
Hmm.
swim cap, everything. She
Hmm.
figured it all out. So anyway, she brings I think she brought my backpack to the hospital, and all of the calls and the text messages I sent to myself.
Oh, wow.
Well, it was kind of I was in shock. I'm like, "What's your
Yeah,
wife's phone number?" I gave him my phone number.
great,
Like,
great,
and,
great.
and once again, I didn't have a head injury. It
No.
just was.
Hmm.
So once again, like lessons learned. Like
Hmm.
I don't know. Like maybe we need to like learn more than one person's phone number.
Yeah.
Number one, and number two, have like something written down somewhere. Like I don't know. There
Well,
needs to be a better plan.
you weren't wearing your bib. Was it a bib race for the bike, or you had no?
So there was no bibs for the bike.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
but my bike had a number on it,
yeah.
and I had a number on numbers all over me. They're in
Right.
Canada, they're crazy. Like I had numbers on on my arms, my race number, and so one on each arm,
Yep.
on my hands
Hmm.
for the swim, and then on my legs because I was wearing calf sleeves. It was like actually on the side of my knees.
Yeah.
So I mean, I was pretty well identified. But and that is, I guess that's some of the frustration is I was so well identified, and you have to sign all these waivers.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm not allergic to this, like that kind of stuff. The race direction should have called my emergency contact,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like that's the thing is like, why do we do all this stuff and have to fill out all these waivers if they're not actually going to follow
Right.
through?
Right.
Like that was actually quite frustrating. Like looking back, as far as like mistakes that the race
Mm.
organization made,
Yeah.
because every race you go to, you have to fill that stuff out. And it was the same with.
Oh, totally. And a lot of times we fill it out and we're just sort of like, oh, let me put down a name, but yet this is where it's really important to have that. But then the race itself needs to be organized in a way that once there's something happening, they get your number, they communicate back, they figure out who the emergency contact is. And being an international race, yes, it's in Canada, but still an international race. We've got to be thinking about things like that when we are training or racing in different countries because phone systems just operate differently. And yeah, it's that is really an amazing part though that you're texting yourself because on one hand you seem to have been rather aware of what was going on,
Yeah.
but I think you're so trained as an athletic trainer to be able to respond in an objective way
Yeah.
that you probably just went into athletic training mode and it was someone else who was injured. It just happened to be you. And,
Exactly.
and so that you came across as being very, very aware, but
Yeah.
probably inside your brain was going off in all different directions.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, back to the story. Then so they transfer me to the trauma center. So I go in an ambulance to the trauma center. It's like a half-hour ambulance ride and get to the trauma center. And now it's already like this accident happened at 8 in the morning, and now it's probably 8 at night by the time we get there. And this things take time. And well, now I'm getting hungry.
And your clavicle is still broken.
And
No, nothing's happened with it yet.
my clavicle's broken. Well, now I know all of the things that are going on, and like for them to like kind of go through trauma there, they needed like a trauma uh, physician to clear me, and then an orthopedic physician to clear me before I could eat,
Okay. Wow.
because if I had to do surgery that night.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. 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 That's right.
So the first physician that came and saw me, and he did an evaluation of me, the trauma doc, and um, we got into an argument. I'll just tell you on the podcast, and I'm not going to say his name, but we got into an argument because he did an okay evaluation of me, but I know what a good neural evaluation is. And he's like, okay, yeah, we're going to do a CT scan of your brain because we're worried about a brain injury. And I'm like, no, like I don't have a brain injury. Like my helmet has a tiny scratch on it. I've been lucid the entire time. I've been conversating with people. I've been like, you have not evaluated my cognitive ability. And now I've already had a CAT scan of my entire basically body. I understand how much radiation is in a CAT scan. I was like, I don't want a CAT scan of my brain. And he's like, well, it's our protocol that if you're in a high-speed accident with multiple fractures that we do. I'm like, I don't want one of these. Like, I can't express this enough, but I was so tired and kind of like just stressed out, fatigued.
Mm-hmm.
My wife is here. Now my mom is with me too. And so he's like, well, like, because I tell him what I do for a living. I teach this stuff. He's like, well, you know that you could easily have a brain injury and not know it. And I'm like, yeah, I do know that, but I also know I wouldn't be able to have a conversation like this.
Yeah.
And you've still not done any evaluation of me for a concussion, and you want to do imaging before you even do. So anyways, he gets into it with me, and finally I told him, I said, hey, listen, like I don't want it, but I'm afraid that if I don't do it, you won't take good care of me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He's like, no, we'll still take good care of you. And then he goes, I just really want you to do a CT scan of your head or your brain. And finally I gave up. I'm like, whatever my wife wants, I'm defer to her. And so she's like, if you think, doctor, that's the best thing, that's what we'll do. So we get a CT scan of my head. And of course it comes back negative.
Yeah.
And so that kind of made me mad. And then they finally moved me out of the ER, and an ortho came in, and it's like almost midnight now. And she comes in, and she looks at my CT scans, and she's like, well, your clavicle looks like it's in pretty good alignment, and where your hip is fractured, it's through the joint, but it doesn't look like it's a weight bearing surface. So like we're not recommending surgery. And I'm like, okay, good. She's like, we're gonna, obviously get you admitted into the trauma unit. And I'm like, okay, can I eat? She's like, well, no, not until you've been cleared by trauma. And I'm like, well, trauma said as long as I was cleared by you.
Oh boy.
So they kind of get in the back and forth. And finally I get actually up to a room in the trauma unit at like 2 a.m. And then the nurse comes and, really concerned with how the TV works. And I'm like, I don't care about the TV at 2 a.m. Can I eat?
Yeah.
Let me go look. Goes, looks. Oh no, sorry, they still haven't cleared you to eat. And I'm like, forget this. And my wife was there. I'm like, what do you got?
Yeah.
I got a protein bar. I got this. I got this. I'm like, I just was eating a whole bunch of stuff. And the nurse comes back and he's like, oh, you weren't supposed to eat. I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah, right.
Like, you don't understand. I was racing.
Yeah.
The start was 6 a.m. So I hadn't eaten since like 4, other than like a gel.
Right.
And I'm used to, like a triathlete, we're used to eating like 4,000 calories a day.
Right.
I'm ready to eat my arm off. And
That's right.
This guy's worried about the TV.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that's how I ended up in the trauma unit.
Mm. Wow.
So I spent almost 4 days in the hospital.
Yeah. And I think that's where we were all getting the news and trying to find out what was going on. And heard that you were going to get the CAT scan, and we're trying to get the details as much as possible. One thing that was good was Marie was really good at communicating out, and at least it seemed like you were in good hands. Yeah. Other than your doctor there, but it seemed like everything was on.
No, I was still in good hands. Like he was being like even the argument I had with the doctor, he was being overly cautious. Yeah. I'm like, I understand. Like I totally understand what they were doing. They were following their protocols, and their job in the emergency room is to save your life, right? And even in the trauma unit, like they did things that I would not have done.
Yeah.
And like as I'm there, I got nothing else to do but like read about this stuff.
And you can't eat at that point, or not eat.
Right. So like the thing that I came to the realization of relatively early on in the trauma center was that once again, their job is to save my life.
Mhm.
I have a different paradigm and I had different goals. My goals are to get out of here and get back on my bike and race in December.
Yeah, yeah, right,
I'm going to New Zealand. I'm
right.
going to race. That's my goals.
Yeah,
Their goal is to get me out of there without dying.
yeah, it's
Right.
a trauma center, right.
It's a trauma center.
Hmm.
And as soon as I kind of came around to that, and
Hmm.
and here's the thing is like at this point now, like once I was in the trauma center, I knew I wasn't gonna die.
Yeah.
And there's little tricks I learned. Like the reason I knew I wasn't gonna die, they put me at the end of the hall.
Hmm.
The more serious patients get put in the center, closer to the medical staff.
Okay.
Oh, I did learn that.
Oh, there you go.
But I did want to share one other thing, and I think this is an actually really important thing. Um, is that right from the beginning, I didn't want any opioids,
You didn't want what?
pain medication.
Okay.
And I teach about opioids. I teach about opioid addiction. I teach about overdoses. And I also know the research really well that there are other ways to treat pain that can be almost as effective. And it got to the point where the first doctor was like, "Well, what do you want?" And I explained, "Hey, I want Tylenol and I want Toradol or
Hmm.
Ketorolac." And together those work really, really well. It's not addictive. And so, anyways, I was in the first day offered opioids, I want to say 8 times
Hmm.
and denied every time. Like,
Okay.
no, I don't want them. And then the first morning I was in the trauma center and they were doing rounds. The doc's like, "Well, we want to, how's your pain?" I'm like, "Well, it's like a 1 or 2 out of 10 if I'm not moving. I haven't tried moving yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to hurt really bad." And she's like, "Well, we have opioids for you, or we have pain medication if you need it." I'm like, "No, I just prefer to stay on the Ketorolac and the Tylenol." Okay, she's like, "I'm just going to write the script anyways
Hmm.
for pain medication. So if you need it, it's there." I'm like, "Okay, I understand." So I was getting Tylenol like 3 times a day, and then this Toradol injection, I think it was twice a day. And every time they asked me if I wanted something stronger.
Hmm.
Or they would ask me, "Do you want like stronger pain medication?" And every time, like, it's in my chart that I don't want this. And so I counted and I lost count at 20, the number of times I was offered opioids. And so the last day when I was leaving, and they were doing the rounds, and the physician came in. And it's a teaching hospital. So there was like 6 students there, and some of the students I'd got to know, and like I told, when they'd do stuff, I'd grade them on how they did their evaluations of me and stuff, just because I'm a jerk. And I said to her, I said to the head physician, I'm like, "Can I just give you like a little bit of feedback?" And she's like,
Hmm.
"Yeah, absolutely." And she was a nice lady. And I said, day one when I came in, I told people and I told you that I didn't want any opioids. And she's like, "Yeah, I remember that." And I said, "I've been offered opioids over 20 times, including last night at 4 o'clock in the morning when I was kind of in and out of like, and they told me that my Toradol prescription had ran out and they could give me pain medication.
Hmm.
And I thought it was Tylenol, but it was something else. And I realized it before I took it. I said, I've never been addicted to opioids, but had I been and conquered that addiction and I
Yeah.
was too embarrassed to say it to anybody,
Hmm.
do you know how hard it would have been to turn down opioids 20 times, including 4 o'clock in the morning? And I'm like, I don't, and I kept going. I was like, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know how things are in Calgary, but where I'm from, we have an opioid epidemic.
Hmm.
And she's like, "Okay, noted." And she walked away.
Oh boy.
And I'm like, it just is really frustrating was really frustrating for me because once again, I've never had an opioid addiction.
Yeah, right.
And I was managing, like I was literally, when I was there, other than when I was doing the therapy, my pain was really low. Like
Hmm.
as long as I didn't move.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, that was a really frustrating thing for me.
And I think that's a good lesson for people to hear is you as the patient need to be asking questions because a lot of times the way that the treatment is set up is they're just following an algorithm. And they're
Exactly.
saying, oh, someone's in trauma, give them pain meds.
Yep.
And that's just the algorithm, and that's what they get used to doing. And by not asking questions, you would have ended up on opioids anyhow. And so I think this is really important that it's okay to ask your healthcare team what's going on, and to have a voice in the treatment.
Yeah, advocate for yourself.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
John, do you want to know the main reason I didn't want to be on opioids? I'll tell you, this I'm not afraid to say this,
Mhm.
is I had 5 broken ribs and at this time only realized 2 fractures in my pelvis and hip. One of the main side effects is constipation.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, how am I gonna have a bowel movement
Right, right, right.
if I can't, like, John, I literally could barely talk because, and we
Hmm.
talked that week because I couldn't breathe in deep enough.
Yeah, right.
Talk. How am I gonna have a bowel movement if I have constipation
Hmm.
with, I
Yeah,
couldn't fathom that. I was like, I'd rather deal with the pain than deal with not having to,
yeah,
like,
right,
pain of not
right, right.
have a bowel movement.
Hmm.
And so, anyways, like that was part of it. And
Yeah.
it's not that I'm like completely agnostic to pain meds. Like, as the story goes on, I actually did have my clavicle surgically repaired, and by now my hip is feeling a little bit better. And so, like, I did do 2 nights worth of opioids
Hmm. Hmm.
because post-surgical pain is a little bit different situation. So,
Well,
anyways,
and again, it's nice that you had family there and someone else, your wife in this case, really paying attention to what's going on. But these are not easy things to navigate. You think once you're in the hospital, it's all, hands off, but you need to be active in that process. So I think that that's a really good message. I know. And then your support crew had the added, joy of trying to figure out the logistics to get you out of the hospital, where to put you, and then ultimately how to get you back to Las Vegas, because now you're wheelchair bound. You've got a you got a busted hip, you got busted ribs, you got a busted clavicle. You're probably moving less and less as the clock kept
ah,
ticking.
well, and plus I had the bleeding in the lung as well on top of that.
Yeah,
So I was having trouble, like,
right.
actually inspirating. I had an inspiration monitor,
Mm,
or a monitor, exerciser that I
yeah.
was that I was using. So yeah, it was, yeah. I'll be completely honest with you. After day 3 in the hospital, they wouldn't let me leave until I could pass physical therapy.
Mm,
Physical therapy, to pass it, I had to be able to walk with this walker.
oh boy.
And it was a super big challenge.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know me though, like, I'm on the internet, like,
Mhm.
how to do this?
Yeah.
What are alternative ways to walk? And so the morning that I got kind of cleared, I just told myself, whatever it takes, I'm getting out of here today.
Yeah. Yeah.
People, this is, I mean, obviously people, the hospital is not a good place to rest.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, man, I like gutted through that, did my 10 steps, whatever he wanted me to do, and or maybe it's more than that, and then showed him my new way. I figured out how to walk.
Hmm.
And fortunately, my dad's awesome. They wouldn't let me leave because they asked me how many steps I had to go up and down. Until I could prove I could do that,
Yeah.
I couldn't leave. And so my dad built ramps.
Oh,
Did it?
nice.
It's only
Yeah.
2 steps. It was only 2 steps, but he built ramps.
Yeah.
My dad's a carpenter, so he built
Yeah.
2 ramps. And so I told him, I said, hey, I've got ramps at home. Like, I've got a support system. And I, like, basically gutted my way out of, BS'd my way out
Yeah.
of that. And then, so I passed that. And, like, okay, now you got to pass occupational therapy.
Oh boy.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, come on. I just want to get out of here.
Yeah.
Like, here, I can brush my teeth. Like, I'm good. I got a support system. Let's get out of here.
Mhm.
So, anyways, though, the problem is I couldn't fly, and neither did I want to. Like,
Mm,
just being in the car from, like, the hospital to my parents' house, which is like 10 minutes, was
yeah.
very, um, I couldn't really move.
Yeah.
I faked my way through physical therapy, but I really couldn't move other than, like, I'd walk back
Yeah.
and forth to the
And you
bathroom.
shouldn't have been moving either.
No,
That's,
I shouldn't have been.
Right.
I was supposed to be basically as little weight bearing as possible.
Hmm.
And that one fracture was through the hip joint.
Yeah.
Uh, so, anyways, I will give a shout out to like Delta Airlines and WestJet. They're together. They actually were awesome as far as like they refunded our tickets coming home, and then we rebooked, and we are able to use the credit. That was awesome, even though we didn't have like the insurance
Okay.
or that kind of ticket. So then it was like 10 days later, 9 days later, we flew back, and I'm not gonna tell you that was not a rough day. That was a rough day, but obviously, like this because you were there. But I really thank you and everyone that came to the airport and kind of
Hmm.
kind of surprised me and cheered me on at the airport when we got to Las Vegas, and subsequently got home, and I got home on Wednesday, and then I knew I needed my clavicle fixed. It
Yeah.
was just completely unstable. I could feel like every time I moved, I could feel it moving. I knew it was never going to heal. So fortunately enough, I was actually able to get that fixed like 2 days later. I flew home on Wednesday, had it fixed on Friday. But I was still really worried about my hip, honestly, more than my clavicle. So then the next week, I got an MRI of my pelvis and hip, and turned out there was actually 10 fractures
Oh boy.
in my pelvis. And it's kind of crazy to think about. Like I was going 18 miles an hour, and I ended up with 16 different fractures.
Yeah. But
Um,
that's the thing about bike crashes is one, you've got the speed, but you also have the height.
mhm.
And like I even talk with people who get injured from stopping and not being able to unclick, and they fall over. They may reach out with their hand, and then they end up breaking their clavicle, or maybe nothing gets broken, but they're super sore afterwards. And I keep telling them, you just fell. You fell from the ground from this high, and that's going to hurt. And so, I mean, even though you say you didn't have the speed, you're still falling from, good
Well,
distance
and
from.
I was shot up into the air.
Right, right,
Like
right.
basically, if you think about it, if my front wheel turned,
Yeah,
I went over the guy.
yeah,
Like I
yeah,
have no idea how high I
yeah.
was in the air. Like
Hmm.
we've all seen like pictures of people like doing like an
Yeah,
endo or something like that. Like
yeah.
that was I was propelled into the air.
Mhm.
So no, like there was like but to me it's amazing the amount of like trauma my body took.
Yeah, right, right.
Like still like I've crashed, you've crashed, like I've crashed and come away with separated shoulder. I've crashed and
Mhm.
scraped my knee. I've crashed and nothing's happened.
Yeah,
I've crashed where my front wheel, I was turning once and my tire was deflated,
oh
and I
yeah,
landed really hard on my hip. Like,
yep.
I mean, I bruised my hip,
Hmm.
right? And I cut up my elbow, and I'm like, okay, I'm good. Like, so it is interesting, like just the wrong way to land
Yeah,
at the wrong
right.
time.
Well, give us a status right now
Yeah,
and a
yeah,
prognosis, and
yeah, yeah.
how's the future looking?
So status is honestly like today, it's really, John, it's kind of interesting. I seem to have like 2 good days, one bad day.
Yeah.
Like it's just very much been like that.
Mhm.
And today's a really good day. Um, I've been well, starting last Sunday, I started to be able to walk without a walker. And so been slowly adding up more walking. I'm up to like 15 minutes, which is winning. On Monday, I have a recumbent bike. So I started on the indoor recumbent bike, just 10 minutes. Then I did 15, then 20, and I finished at 30. So I did a bunch of that. Then I saw my doctor yesterday. And he's like, okay, you can start to get on the real bike on the trainer. So I did a half hour on the trainer last night and a half hour today. But man, it's hard.
Yeah.
The ribs especially. As soon as I start like get a heart rate above about 110, man, I feel those ribs. My hips are feeling good. They're
Yeah.
feeling really good. Believe it or not, like it's funny. When I originally got all the diagnosis, I'm like, well, the clavicle is the least of my worries, right? Because like, yeah, swimming, yeah, figure that out.
Mhm.
Like the hip was what I thought, and the ribs were the most serious. But I'm actually having a lot of issue with the clavicle. I'm doing I'm doing rehab. I hired an athletic trainer, former student of mine, and he's been coming to the house, and he comes like every other day, and we're working. I literally just finished rehab before we got on, like 2 hour rehab sessions, working on getting my motion back and my
Yeah.
strength back, and um, so things are progressing. I can start running tomorrow on the I have the lever system, which we've talked about. So taking the weight off, I got to take 30% is the way I got to start with.
Hmm.
Basically, I'm going to go on a stress fracture return to run protocol.
Hmm.
So the prognosis is good. You know, it's just honestly, John, it's been a big challenge, and
Yeah.
the truth of the matter is like I have a wonderful support system,
Yeah.
including you and everyone in the community. Like I can't tell you how many, and I feel bad. Like some people I feel like I haven't responded to, but I've been getting so many messages, and like honestly, I don't think we've ever had so many people over to the house. People
Yeah. Right.
bringing like food and
Cosmo's loving it.
Cosmo is not too friendly with people. So, but
So I want to tap into that just a little bit because, initially it was so traumatic. It was like, well, Ted, race again.
yeah,
And, and you and I are not talked about this before. We both love racing. We're getting older. It's all that, but at the same time, we just love it. And so when something gets taken away from you, that's hard to deal with. And so now not only is being active taken away from you, you're not sure what the future holds for you, and you're bedridden. You can't move at all. I mean, how maybe just talk a little bit about how did you keep your spirits up and focused on the positive aspect of recovery because that's so important now.
John, it's really interesting. It's hard. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like there's been many days of crying and tears, and um, some of it was just like uh, honestly like just hiding from it. I hate to say that. Like
Yeah.
finding things to distract me, right? Like I'm gonna let you in my like sick little secret. Are you ready? I've watched more episodes of Survivor than I'm on season 38.
Oh goodness.
Right? Well, because it's just mindless. Like I'm not thinking about me. I'm just watching these people like do this crazy TV show.
Yeah.
I'm not proud of the fact that I'm sitting around watching TV all the time, but like especially in the beginning, like I couldn't focus.
Yeah.
Like I would try and read some like stuff like more like my interest stuff, and I just couldn't focus on it. It'd be in and out. Like I really had to find something like that didn't need much focus.
Hmm.
Kind of take my mind off, to be completely honest with you. Also in the beginning, especially the first 10 days, we were trying to watch some different things on TV. I couldn't laugh.
Yeah.
Laughing was like we were watching something Deary Girls on Netflix, and the first episode, and I'm just like laughing. I'm like, maybe I have to turn it off. I can't.
Yeah.
Like I can't. So there's that side, John. And then honestly, when I left the hospital, I told the doctor, well, after I ranted, I said, just so you know, like I really do appreciate you, and I'm gonna race a half Ironman in December in New Zealand. And she kind of looked at me like, no, you're not.
Mm.
And I'm gonna write them like a letter with a postcard, and I'm gonna send it to them from New Zealand.
That's great.
And like this New Zealand race, oh my gosh, this is like my white whale,
Yeah. Great.
right? Like I first qualified in 2019 to go race, and it got canceled twice because of COVID.
Yeah.
And finally, I was able to defer it to Finland. I
Yeah.
couldn't go to Finland because I had a surgery last summer. I requalified in St. George. I'm like, I'm going to freaking New Zealand.
Hey.
And even if I've got to walk most of the race,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Like to
Mhm.
me, like honestly, having that goal of
Mhm.
that race
Yeah.
is what's driving me, right?
Mhm.
Like today when the athletic trainer I'm working with, he's like digging into my armpit and making me cry so we can gain some more motion in my shoulder.
Yeah.
The carrot is there, and that's the reason, right?
Mhm.
Like I love racing triathlon, but I think that this, like getting to this race in New Zealand, because it's been such a like 5 year journey
Yeah, right.
to get to this race, there's an extra incentive. Now, that being said, like it's been super hard, like little things. Like I was supposed to race a 70.3 last weekend that I'd paid for. And
Hmm.
like that was hard when I was getting the emails from Ironman. Hey,
Yeah,
come pick up your packet.
yeah,
And
right.
then Tuesday, your photos are ready.
Hmm.
An email. Oh my gosh, like breaks your heart.
Right.
Like I know I can't get my money back, but I know there should be a way to go and say, hey, like
Yeah.
I'm really injured. Please don't send me
Mhm.
reminders.
Yeah.
Um, but that being said, like I have had a hard time signing up for anything else.
Hmm.
It's like,
Yeah.
you know, the Oceanside and St. George window closed for
Right.
like the Flex 90. I normally would have signed up for those. I just I went into the website, I couldn't pull the trigger. So I have a little bit of trigger apprehension, but I also have like this race in New Zealand that is kind of
That's
keeping
your
me.
flag. That's what you're shooting for.
Yeah, and you know what? Here's the thing: is it's okay to set a goal and not make it,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? But like the my physician says this is possible. Like
Yeah.
there, like physiologically, it's possible. Your injuries are at a point where they should be. Like he's like, you know, we talked about. I'm not going there to win. I'm not going there to set a PR. Like the goal is different,
Yeah.
and the goal to finish
Hmm.
might just be the goal. And maybe it ends up being I do the swim and I do the bike and I can't run.
Well, and I think that's the athlete mindset that you have. You're applying to recovery
Yep.
and applying to getting healthy again. And it's just the time window. You're sort of stuck. The race is the race, and you can't push that off. But I really like that athlete mindset. But in thinking back, so something that maybe you learned about yourself that you didn't know as you went through this process.
And this is going to sound really, really weird. It was not really about me. It's more about my wife.
Mm,
Like I always knew she loved me,
yeah.
but I never realized how much,
Mm,
like how
yep.
deep that was
Yeah.
until this
Yeah.
incident. She's been like amazing,
Yep.
and like I'm almost crying here,
Mhm.
and continues to be. And she's got her own struggles, and she's got, but the way that she took care of me and kind of bossed me around and
Mhm.
continues to, it's just amazing. So I just like I think that sometimes I guess in life you take those relationships a little bit for granted,
Right. Mhm.
and this made me realize like how strong like our relationship is.
Mhm.
And so if this had to happen to maybe make our relationship stronger moving forward,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe it was meant to be.
Oh, I got a tear in my eye.
You know her. You know how
Yeah.
wonderful she is. But it's yeah, it's amazing. And
Yeah.
even like you were mentioning earlier, like how she kept everybody in touch. Like that's hard.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah.
Like I've got so many people in my life,
Yeah.
right? I've
Yeah.
got all the people I coach. They're kind of like over here. They're friends and coach, right?
Mhm.
I got all my friends. I got all my triathlon community. I got people from work.
Mhm.
I got my students.
Mhm.
I got my former students, and things get trickled out, right?
Yeah.
And I will be getting like text messages from somebody that, they were a student a couple of years ago. And I get text, hey, I'm like, I can't respond,
Right.
especially the
Right. Right.
first week or so. Like I like Marie, you need my phone. Like I
Mhm.
can't do this.
Yeah.
And the fact that she was able to manage that all like that,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Well, this probably a good way to wrap this up is to dedicate this episode to her
Yes.
because she did a big lift in terms of even getting you back and managing all that, and obviously the love that you two have just got stronger, and so I think that's really nice to hear.
Oh, thanks. And honestly, John, the other thing I keep thinking of is our last podcast. I think we talked about injuries, and no, seriously, but not just about injuries, but we talked about the patients.
Yeah. Hmm.
and it was almost foreshadowing. Unfortunately, for my situation, your bike crash that you had, which we can definitely talk about next time if you'd like.
Mhm.
Um, and that's something that like I've had to like really live.
Yeah, right.
Like I could walk 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I
Yeah.
wasn't supposed to.
Hmm.
And like that patience is important. And
Yeah.
even like today on the bike at about 27, I was going to do 35 minutes. At 27, my knees start hurting. And that's one of the things like I have not loaded those tendons in like
Yeah,
6 weeks,
right, right. Mhm.
right? And I'm like, okay, get off,
Yeah.
right? This is not about like pushing through right now.
Mhm. No.
And and even though like, I'm doing 140 watts or 130 watts,
Hmm.
that's fine. Like I'm winning.
Vision. Yeah.
And it's and it's interesting that that our last podcast before this was that, and
Hmm.
I've really like been trying to live
Yeah.
that.
Right.
The only time I wasn't patient was getting out of the hospital when I was a patient. There's the ironic part.
I love
Awesome. Well, hey John, the other big news is this will be the last podcast of my mustache.
it. Uh-oh.
Yep, I've decided that when I go back to work, which is my first day back live, it'll be on Monday. There'll be no mustache because this thing has
Oh my
bad
goodness.
luck.
Yeah. How long have you had it?
I had it since 2020, since COVID.
Okay. There you go.
So it's time for it to go away, and so I'll make the announcement here that
There you go.
on Sunday it's coming off.
Well, goodbye, mustache. Hey, we are all so glad that you're okay.
Thanks,
So
John.
glad that you're on a good road to recovery, and we're all behind you.
I know, and it's honestly it's been amazing, and once again the support from the
Yeah.
community and from everybody has just been amazing. I got one other shout out. So one of the persons from the Tri Club community and one of our listeners sent me some. This is a new beer, John.
I love it.
It's
Yeah.
called Go Freedom Cali Pale. So non-alcoholic, gluten-free.
Yeah.
So we gave Athletic Brewing their chance
I've emailed them again, and
to work with us. So we may have to go with this Go Brewing. So I'll send you the information because you know what? They got a skateboard on it. What they need
there
is
you
a
go.
triathlete on it,
Yeah.
and they can be our new sponsor.
Love it, love it. That's great. Hey, great to talk with you. I'm
Great
glad
to
we're
talk
back
with you.
rolling again. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This is not only good to hear what happened, but it is instructive in terms of how we can be responding if we're involved with a crash or seeing someone that's crashed. So good
Awesome.
stuff.
All right, thanks, John. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too. Enjoy.
Bye.